92.7 3FM, your urban lifestyle radio.
Thanks very much for joining us at 3FM 92.7, and it's time for First Take. My name is Dzifa Gbeho-Bampoh. And CLOGSAG leaders are yet to come to a conclusion on discussions with government over negotiations on neutrality allowance.
It's a solution between an employer and an employer. What is his locus? My friend, tell him to go and sleep. He should mind his own business.
Well, day 3 of the CLOGSAG strike persists and is over 20% neutrality allowance, where CLOGSAG has brushed over criticism of their demand.
I still hold the view, if we want to have a conversation about general remuneration, we should have, but to pick apart the principles that undergird the civil service and negotiate on each one of them as a basis for remuneration is quite frankly not the best at all.
We ask if this allowance can be stopped and if this will spark a series of demands from workers as the economy continues to bite. Also this afternoon, controversy over COVID fund expenditure. So how much have we spent?
FM 92.7.
We'll be discussing questions raised by former President John Mahama about COVID expenditures and whether there'll be any accountability. We'll hear from the presidential advisor on health. All that coming up this afternoon on First Take. A meeting should have happened today between the CLOGSAG leadership and government and organized labor over their 3-day persisting strike over 20% neutrality allowance. Well, there's been no decision yet, and we are unsure about whether progress will be made and when. Well, Mr. Bampoh Ado has been speaking with TV3 about the objective of this allowance which they are demanding.
Discussion, and there are certain things we put on the table, so when it's going to get back to us. So when they get back to us, then we'll know the way forward. Well, that's for us. These are our negotiations. We can't give you details about. Some certain things have been put before us. We also stated our position. Government is going to get back to us. We've not really negotiated anything. The directive from the National Labour Commission was for Minister of Finance to give us a payment plan, and that's what we've just done.
And that's Isaac Bampoh Ado. He is the CLOGSAG boss. Well, can the allowance be stopped, knowing that government had already agreed to pay, but there are questions about whether government should actually even be paying a neutrality allowance? We'll come to that, but it's been 3 days of strike, and we can check now in our regions about what's been going on, whether CLOGSAG still remains on strike. Let's speak to Evans Inkum, who is our Shanti Region Bureau Chief. Evans, good afternoon. Thank you. Tell us what's happening in Kumasi in reference to the CLOGSAG Clock strike? Is the strike holding as of today?
Well, so a strike on paper, but on the ground, minimal impact. Because if you go to the ministries, there are still some important offices that are still working. For instance, I checked on the Controller and Accountant General Department. We are working. I spoke to the Ashanti Regional Director of that particular unit, and she tells me that they cannot sit at home and watch people lose their salaries. They are in the office to ensure that people validate their details or information at that particular department. So their work is very crucial and most importantly critical because it borders on livelihood. So they cannot sit at home. What I asked her further is what they are doing to some extent, of course, it does contravene the position of the mother body, but how kindly are they taking this particular move? And she tells me she has been in constant engagement with leadership of CLOSAC, and they seem to understand what is happening as far as that particular unit is concerned. Then I moved to the Registrar General Department. Work is also, they are working, for want of a better word, they are working. I saw a chunk of people who have come there to register their businesses. Then I also asked why, and they said their work is also equally important, that they cannot sit at home. The fact of the matter is that with that particular office, it will be extremely difficult because if they are to stay at home, even one day, it will impact negatively on the local economy because Ashanti region basically is an informal sector-based economy. A lot of people are into private businesses, and the few or a fraction of the, employment, a fraction of those employed work for the public sector. So you see a large number of people, you see that particular environment inundated with people who have come there to register their businesses. So that is the situation at the moment in the Ashanti region.
All right. Evans, don't go. Let me just bring on our colleague in the northern region, Christopher Mwako. Chris, tell us, is the strike holding in Tamale, or you also have pockets of offices where some civil and local government workers are working and others are not?
Yes, so today I am in the Savannah region. Earlier today I moved from the Northeast Gonja district to the East Gonja district, and visiting some of the officers at the local assemblies. I realized that most of them have not been to work, and the few that are there are the laborers and other staff who were like security officers who had gone to ensure that the whole place is kept in order. But the other staff, like the budget office, the other officers were not at post, and I understand that they have not been at post since last week.
In terms of impact, are people away, meaning have people stayed away, or do people continue to come seeking to access services?
Yeah, so some new people still come to access services, but unfortunately due to the strike, they are unable to get officers to attend to them because today, for instance, having gone to the East Gonja Municipal Assembly, where some officers like the birth and death registry and others operate from, people who go to work on their birth certificates and that of their children did not have access to their officers, and they were told that they are on strike, so they had to go back. Some traveled as far as overseas communities to come and do that because, according to them, they needed the birth certificate to be able to apply for school and other things because some schools have released their admission form. So it's a very big challenge to them. And I understand that since last week when the strike took effect, that has been the challenge till now.
And what are, officials in Savannah telling you about the strike? That they support it, they will stay away until it's called off? Any word on that, or they are all away?
Yes, so those that I spoke to before going to the ground to find out told me that they are part of the strike, and until their leadership announced that they should get back to post, they are not going. Initially, when they started, I reported that some of the officers were at post, and according to them, they would be at post until they see the effectiveness of the strike. And true to their word, when the strike entered day 2, day 3, they have now joined full force and they are observing it outside. So until they get any information from their national leadership, they are not getting back to post.
All right, thank you very much. Let me go back to my colleague Evans Inkum. So Evans, you went to the Controller and Accountant General. They are working. They gave the reason that they need to process salaries. Then you also looked at the Registrar Generals, but those are just two places. Do you get a sense that it is only because these are some of the critical areas, that's why they are working? But for instance, the local assembly, are people there?
No. So it is biting hard in some of the local assemblies that I visited. For instance, we go to Asuka Municipal. Yes, they are following this particular action religiously. If you move to Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly, the case is not different. So if you go to the local assembly, that is where you see the impact. But the other places that I mentioned, they are working.
Thank you very much. And that's Evans Inkum. He is our Ashanti Region Bureau Chief there, speaking with us about whether the strike is holding or not on the third day in the Ashanti and Savannah regions. And it's still 3FM's first take. But let's hear from Imani Ghana, because today Franklin Kujo indicated that he still stands by his position that the 20% allowance, term neutrality allowance, should not be on the table for negotiation. He was speaking with my colleague Johnny Hughes.
I understand they are not happy with so many other people as well. Probably I was the one who, I don't think I was the one who led the first black, but it looks as if the trail has got a lot more angrier people as well. But that's
Mr. Isaac Bampoh says you should go and sleep because you have no locals to talk about their matter. What do you say?
Well, when I spoke, I slept, and I suspect other people decided to speak. That's why we are still having the conversation today. I've slept already.
But really, do you still hold the view after the explanations that the neutrality allowance should be cancelled?
Well, I mean, I still hold the view. Look, my good friend, if we want to have a conversation about general remuneration, we should have. But to pick apart the principles that undergird the civil service and negotiate on each one of them as a basis for remuneration is quite frankly not the best at all. I have been telling people that since my government A-level days, when I learned that the principles that undergird the civil service are neutrality, anonymity, and permanency, I do not understand today that one group or a group of civil servants will decide that one of the principles should be up for negotiations as a basis for remuneration. I can't just accept that.
Well, but government knew all of this and still went ahead to sign a deal with them on in January. Would you fault the government for going to that deal, or would you say that they were perhaps under pressure, or what do you see?
I don't understand what pressure means here at all. I fault anybody who sat with the closer people to decide this. And if it was the entire civil service, well, maybe I could understand the pressure, but I don't look. It was wrong. That's the point I'm trying to make. It was just simply wrong, and I'm sure this part of the general conversations around remuneration in this country. We started the single spine, came to risk premium, and now we're having all these other, should I call them babies of the single spine system. I think we should separate general, discontent or discontentment with the levels of salary levels in this country from what, quite frankly, was an unnecessary arrangement. I called it fraudulent. I'm sure lawyer will not permit me to use such words, but I can understand that the arrangement itself is so wrong. And I base it on the premise of what I've said earlier, that I don't think the civil service was made or was christened to have its principles negotiated in that manner.
And that's Franklin Kujo. He is the executive director of Imani Ghana, and it's still 3FM's First Take. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back when we speak to the director for advocacy and programs at CDD Ghana, Dr. Kojo Asante. Still on this issue. We'll be right back after this break.
Third Eye Care and Vision Center is here with all your eye care solutions. Yes, Third Eye Care is at it again. Are your lenses becoming foggy because of wearing face masks or sitting in air-conditioned spaces? Are your eyes getting sore and tired after using the computer for prolonged periods? Are you struggling with light from oncoming cars and other vehicles when driving at night? Worry no more. Third Eye Care and Vision Center has all the right solutions for you. We have anti-fog and blue filtering lenses that solves it all. Third Eye Care and Vision Center also stocks all types of lenses, designer frames, sunglasses, and employs very well-trained, qualified, and licensed optometrists to provide all your eye care needs. Locate us at Airport Residential Area, close to the Association International School, opposite Mirage Residence, or Northridge, on the premises of Sunny FM, and close to the Kanda Overhead Bridge. Our working hours are Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Call us on 054-328-7008 or 026-646-2080. Please do well to observe all COVID-19 protocols. Third Eye Care and Vision Center, your total eye care solutions provider.
Have you been told you have abnormal hormonal levels? What is your ovulation like? Have you been experiencing irregular and painful menstruation? If you have any of the above issues, then Fertisa Plus Tab is the best choice for you. Fertisa Plus Tab is a natural food supplement specifically designed and helpful in balancing female hormonal levels, boosting ovulation, management of irregular and painful menstruation, maintaining female health vitality. For bulk purchase, contact Zoe Fertility and Alternative Medical Center at Adenta New Site behind the CAF International School on the Adenta Panton Junction Road or Odoko Tarazu Road near the Nicolosi Hotel. Contact Zoe Fertility on 020-536-3614 or 0243-239534. Zoe, excellent healthcare, our hallmark. This advertisement is FDA approved.
Come and set us free. Holy Spirit, come and fill this place.
92.7 3FM, your urban lifestyle radio.
Thanks for staying with us here on 3FM 92.7, and it's some 20 minutes past 2 here on your news analysis show for the afternoon. First Take, we're running from now till 3 o'clock. But now let's speak with Dr. Kojo Asante, who is the Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at CDD Ghana, one of our leading think tanks in the country. Thanks very much, Dr. Asante, for speaking with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Dzifa.
Great, thanks for joining us. So, ClockSAG strike is in day 3. We are not sure what's going to be happening. What we do know is that an original meeting that was scheduled for today has not happened. We've checked in parts of the country. The strike continues to hold, except in some critical areas, for instance, the Controller and Accountant General's Department or the Registrar General's, for instance. To start with, this whole strike over this particular allowance, one may ask, should we even be having a strike over this particular allowance?
Thank you, Dzifa. No, we shouldn't. And, the government should not be making those kinds of, agreements in the first place, because the justification that is presented for this particular allowance is for me completely immoral. It's almost a tautology in the sense that the bureaucracy is set up, all its traditions throughout history. It's supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to provide the technical support to the political class, at least in a democracy, to make informed decisions. And so there's a sort of elaborate provisions and elaborate arrangements, rules of the game that is meant to ensure that it stays impartial. I mean, if you look at the public services Article 191 or so, where there's protections against victimization to ensure that bureaucrats are able to discharge their responsibilities and with the rule of law in mind, and not to be swayed by partisan interests and so on and so forth, so that we can build a state that will service the people. So if there is any arrangement, some justification that for the bureaucracy to do its job and do it in the way that the Constitution prescribes, it needs to be compensated for it. That for me is constitutionally moral. But secondly, the evidence is very clear that even without that intervention, or even if that intervention has been going on, we know that there's already politicization of the bureaucracy. So even this allowance is paid, it does not even address the problem. So I really feel that that we know where the root cause of this agitation is coming from. And I share in the frustration of CLOSAC and many other workers about the disparities and inequities in the compensation arrangement within the public service, and how that is affecting, efficiency and effectiveness, and actually the building careers, and even the sustainability of the payroll. I share in all of that frustration, but the answer cannot be this. It cannot be, if you can't beat them, then let's join them policy. Then if we all go down that route, we'll completely destroy our state, and we'll all be worse for it. So that this is not really the way to go. I don't know how government came to this agreement that it is constitutionally sound. I don't think that it's allowed. And if it's going on anywhere, it has to be outed, and we have to try and stop it.
So, certainly, there's been a lot of criticism of this allowance. I think the only people I've heard who've tried to support the intention are the government themselves through the Deputy Minister of Employment, and then the CLOSAG leadership speaking on behalf of their members. But you said we have to stop it. Can it be stopped? Because as we understand it, a memorandum of understanding has already been signed as of January. And to be fair, if government had not reneged, as it is wont to renege on many things, we even wouldn't have known about this. So it's almost like a blessing in disguise that we've gotten to know. How can we stop it? How can we stop it?
You're absolutely right about that. But if government had not reneged, would not even know that something like this is going on, which actually also, brings to bear the lack of transparency, around these arrangements that go on with the use of the taxpayers' money. I mean, we go through this ritual every 4 years around Article 71 and S. Gracia and all of the, the details of these monies and things that are being paid, to a class of people. And we all complain about it, including, CROSAC members and so on and so forth. So I don't think that anybody helps the situation by also going to, arrange a special deal for themselves. But the question you raise is, how do we stop it? So there's obviously, from both the government and CROSAC point of view, this is discussed as a part of the conditions of service, basically almost an employer-employee legal arrangement, which, certainly I'm sure CROSAC, that's why they have gone on strike.
And that's the position they take, because when we put the criticisms about the morality even of the name of this allowance, they said, well, this is an agreement between the employer and the employee, and if we are not in that bracket, we have no locus to speak about it.
Well, no, as for the locals, I don't think anybody, can even make that argument. And any taxpayer, any citizen of Ghana whose resources are being used to finance these kinds of activities has every right to question, value for money. Actually, the citizens are empowered under the Constitution to ensure that there's value for money in the use of public resources. So as for that, I don't think that's the issue. The fact that government can come into an agreement for me, what I consider to be an illegality, as I've tried to argue, the constitutional basis for the bureaucracy is that by their design, they're supposed to be impartial. So I think it's a sort of an illegal reward in the first place. It's almost like a tautology, that you pay somebody for something that they're doing. That the arguments have been made that, oh, well, the political class, get these allowances, they can go and stand for this. Well, you can't do the two jobs. Being a civil servant is one job. It's a full-time job. If you want to go and be a political appointee, that's also another full-time job, and you have to resign and go and take it. So you can't double dip in that situation. So that for me is not a justification. As for the justification, it is indefensible. And now the legal complication that it has created, in the sense that this has been added as a condition of service. Somebody can go to court and enforce the right. The only way in which this can be challenged, as I said, is at the constitutional level.
So it means someone has to go to court to challenge it.
Yes, because otherwise, CROSAC is not going to say, well, it's immoral, and therefore we are withdrawing. They will continue to take it. Somebody has to challenge the legality of such an agreement in itself, and any of that, all those agreements that are in the system. And for me, that's really where we really should be going. If we want to resolve this matter, all of us should be working together and banding together to demand proper equities within the public service, rather than adding to the problem and even making it more difficult and extorting, the poor taxpayer, to finance all these extra allowances and all of those things. That is not going to be sustainable in the future.
Now,
so that's what we should be doing. That's what the reforms we should be pushing for.
Okay, now let me ask though, this comes in the context complicated by a debate over the performance of state-owned enterprises and what their conditions of service are. I've not seen the document, but I understand that their conditions of service are quite juicy, to put it mildly. And apart from that, the other critical issue has to do with the remuneration, salary increases annually. And we're told that while minimum wage public sector workers got less than 10% for 2021 and 2022, these SOEs have given staff 30, or senior staff 30, 35%, in some instances we're told 40%. I'm just wondering, is this a separate thing? Should we be looking at SOEs and then look at what the CROSAC members are complaining of, or the SOE complaint is an entirely different matter, seeing as they are not prescribed as public or civil servants?
Well, yes and no. So yes, they are separate in some, and it's not all of them. in some character, depending on what kind of parastatal they are, how much interest the state has in it, and so on. But in some sense, they are part of the same conversation about inequities in compensation, because it's not just SOEs, it's ministers, it's deputy ministers, it's appointees of all kinds of state agencies across the system. And when it comes to SOEs, it's particularly problematic because the discretion that is given to boards and CEOs and so on to make these conditions of service adjustments is incredible. But we know the political incentive that drives that. It's in a lot of these SOEs, these are reward positions for all manner of sympathizers, so whether to the board or to the CEO position, and people are using those things to reward. I mean, if you do any kind of analysis in the last couple of years, it's one of the most sought after places, and you can see the number of people who go ahead SOEs and move on to go and stand for MPs or any other kinds of positions. So the patronage linkages are there, and that's creating a lot of distortions, because the person who makes those adjustments is the board sittings, is the perks and so on that you are using to mobilize resources to go and campaign for some seat or whatever. And we're seeing a lot of examples of that. The Ministry of Finance tried to regulate it recently. I don't know if you recall, where they produce standards, sort of limits, thresholds for board sittings and subcommittee sittings and so on, but didn't go as far as looking at salaries within that sector. So we have to there has to be some rationalization, but certainly it is also an area where if you are competing with the private sector and so on, you are going to use market conditions, to measure how much you should pay a CEO and so on. But when you are making losses, you cannot make those justifications. So that, as I said, it's yes and no, that the SOEs have peculiar characteristics that have to be looked at carefully. But at the same time, they are part of the bigger compensation about inequities. And we need to take a close look at what is going on in that sense, because at the end, it's still public,
it's still public funds that is paying. But briefly, sir, and this is my final question, can the kind of conditions and services they receive be reversed? I take note that you mentioned that some of these are competitive because of what you are trying to attract also for maybe the private sector in some instances. But can people just know that these are state-owned enterprises? They must be paid based on performance. And if a state-owned enterprise is not generating enough revenue to even pay dividend to the state, they shouldn't be paid like it's a private business.
Well, I mean, as I said, the legal complexities, particularly labor law, makes it harder. Once you have signed an agreement, and a lot of the CEOs and so on, they have signed a 4-year agreement and so on, you cannot vary those agreements to their disadvantage whilst that is existing, unless you can show that the agreement itself is illegal, by law. But that's going to be difficult in many of these scenarios. So what we have to be thinking about in terms of reform is to make sure that there's SIGA, the state interest and accountability,
governance accountability unit,
accountability structure is there. It's supposed to regulate state interest across these states. It needs to be now looking across and seeing, what kinds of regulation, what kinds of guidelines can come, so that the next set of, CEOs and boards and so on that are going to come, you can have conditions of service that gives fidelity to value for money, for a state, enterprise, and provide a balance that's needed, so that you cannot be rewarded when you are just bleeding, losses left and right. That cannot be, in any kind of enterprise, that cannot be justified. So definitely, it's going to be difficult in the current scheme to reverse what has been already agreed. But it doesn't stop us from making sure that it doesn't continue into the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kojo Asante. He's the Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the CDD Ghana. And we're just staying with this a little while longer because in spite of the strike, we are learning that negotiations continue. But it's not just about CLOCSAG. There are other associations in the, Trades Union Congress who also feel that they also deserve something extra as well. One of those groups is known as the Public Services Workers Union of TUC, PSWU. Now, they've written a letter which they are requesting for urgent action, political neutrality allowance to qualified members of PSWU, and it reads, we express our warm regards to you and further request for urgent grant of political neutrality allowance, PONA, to qualified members of the PSWU. Now, having followed developments surrounding political neutrality allowance for some public sector workers, it is pertinent to state that the grant of such allowance to a section of the workforce to the neglect of others in the same or similar category defeats the underlying principles of salary administration in Ghana. The Constitution of Ghana and other enabling acts which are in laws requires a number of public sector institutions and their workers, a number which are members of PSWU, to be politically neutral in the discharge of their duties. This includes, but is not limited to, the Electoral Commission, National Commission for Civic Education, National Media Commission, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, etc. At our last National Executive Council meeting held in Kumasi in March 2022, members resolved to bring the request to the attention of the state for urgent consideration. We therefore call for urgent engagement on the matter, and that's a letter signed by Bernard J., who is the General Secretary of the PSWU of the TUC of Ghana. But we can now speak to the Deputy General Secretary, Mr. John Sampa, who joins us live. Good afternoon, Mr. Sampa. My name is Dzifa.
Good afternoon, Dzifa.
Great. Thanks for joining us. So, over the last 4 days, there's been criticism of this PONA, as you have now termed it. Why do you want to join in this controversial allowance that many feel we shouldn't even have negotiated to pay in the first place as a country?
Well, I believe that you have heard the government side, especially the Deputy Minister of Employment, actually explaining and justifying why political neutrality allowance can be paid to the civil service. And based on that and other discussions that are currently topical issues in the country, we thought that, yes, the condition of service for public workers in general is not too good. And while we are even looking at reviewing the service time and making it better, with the government already saying that segment of the workforce can be given political neutrality allowance because they are barred from taking part in partisan politics, then maybe they have forgotten. But there are other public institutions that it is also clear either in the Constitution or by their code of conduct or by us not to engage in partisan politics. And a few is what we have, examples that we have taken.
We get that, Mr. Sampa, but you have not answered my question. My question is that the view is that this should not even be up for payment at all. There's criticism even of this payment. If there's a need for salary adjustment, that's a totally different conversation. But for anyone who enters the civil service or any of these institutions listed in Article 93B of the Constitution, which are required to remain neutral. When you go in there, then you know that this is the requirement. So the question I'm asking is, this is already controversial. Why do you want it? Why don't you rather call for overall salary adjustment? Why don't you call for state-owned enterprises to stop paying exorbitant conditions of service when they are generating losses? Why don't you call for a total overhaul of a system that is generally fair, instead of joining the fray for an allowance for neutrality when really we shouldn't even pay for that? That's the question I'm asking.
Okay, so the simple answer to your question is the fact that we have already asked for improved condition of service, and this year we are starting the public sector standing negotiating process, and so there will be salary increase for this year. And as the Secretary General of TBC said during the pre-May forum, we are going to actually push out, and we are not taking anything below inflationary rates. Nevertheless, we are saying that it is not only the civil service that is barred from partisan politics. We have the electoral commission and others. And we are saying that, yes, it is controversial. But if the employer says that he will consider it, and he's defending that he will consider it, why shouldn't I? If somebody wants to give my people money, why shouldn't I go and take it? So we have actually written to government so that we will be added to the discussion. If the government thinks that public sector workers deserve political neutrality allowance, we are saying that some of the public sector that we have listed are also by practice, barred from partisan politics, and that they should also be considered. I think that it is a very simple logic. We are not saying it's controversial, but if the employer says that it's controversial, but I understand and I want to pay it, why will you say that it's controversial? So although the employer wants to pay, you don't want to take it. So our members have asked us that we should write, because some of them, it is explicit by the nature of their work that they cannot be partisan. And therefore, if the government is paying some people for not being partisan, they are also part of it. And we should write to the employer to that effect. And that is what we have done.
So if, in the light of the entire debate we're having, and the government decides that, well, I'm not going to move forward with a neutrality allowance, I will look at the entire system and try and make things better generally for everyone, what would PSWU do?
That is the whole essence of negotiation. And the letter that we have written is actually calling for negotiation. That is the whole essence of negotiation. We have come with our proposal. The government can also come with a counter proposal and say that, look, we may have to look at this, we may have to look at this, we may have to rather add money here to you. And if it makes sense, we can actually forgo. The truth is that if the political neutrality is problematic, government should come as a counter. But the government is not really saying that he has problem with it. It is a certain percent of the public that say they have problem with it. The deputy minister was defending it. So the truth is that the government has not said he has problem with it. And we have no problem at all if our people are getting it. It's money we look into our pockets. Our members' pockets. Our members actually pay dues to us to represent them. So if there is money for people who do not take part in partisan politics, and the government is giving to other people, and you also know that the same law doesn't allow you to be partisan, why do you say that it's controversial so you will not identify yourself with it?
Now,
we are interested in it.
Okay. Now, the other issue is about the concept of the neutrality entirely. There is also a school of thought that the public sector and some of these institutions you mentioned have already been politicized. A lot of politicians bring in parallel individuals to run certain rules when there are duplicate officials in that same position in the entity. So the question is that maybe the neutrality paying for people's neutrality will not change anything, because politicians will continue to run a parallel system, and individuals in the organization will still continue to engage in some partisan activity, even though they are not required to. What's your response to that, sir?
Well, that is some people's school of thought. The good thing is that the institutions and the people that I represent, they are not partisan. And if anybody has evidence to the contrary, the person will have to. I have seen people in my union that have lost their job because they went to contest primaries of a political party. And at the end of it, this very committee was actually called, and they have been dismissed because the rules are very clear that they are not supposed to be partisan. So the truth is that it is the government and it is the management of these organizations that are supposed to make sure that if they know anybody that have been partisan, obviously they will have to call. Because when we politicize the public service, it is too dangerous for everybody. And so I know that, yes, individuals may have their political parties, they are affiliated or that they are friendly to, but we don't actually go and pay positions in the party, communication officer, this and that and that. No, we don't do that. And we don't contest for positions. And if anybody should contest for any position, then it is up to the management of those organizations to bring those people to book. Why those things have not been done? And if somebody say that, look, political or partisan politics is your fundamental human right, but because of this service, because of this you have joined, you are being denied, and that I am willing to compensate you for that. We also think that there is nothing wrong with it, and we want that same condition to also apply to those people.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sampah. He is the Deputy General Secretary of the Public Sector Workers Union, PSWU, and it's still 3FM's First Take. Thanks for staying with us here on 3FM's First Take, and we have 13 minutes to 3. And before we wrap up on the show, some item that is generally brewing slowly, and it's about government challenging former President Mahama to publish documentation supporting accusations he made of mismanagement of COVID funds by the Akufo-Addo government. Now, the former president was speaking sometime last month during the 24th African Business Conference organized by the Harvard Business School, alleging government channeled COVID-19 pandemic windfall of over 33 billion meant to cushion the economy into its 2020 campaign activities. Let's hear him.
In my country, Ghana, our economy has emerged in extremely poor shape from the COVID experience. A ballooning deficit, double-digit inflation, a nose-diving currency, increasing debt distress are some of the symptoms of a very ill economy. Ghana's case was easy to predict with a cavalier handling of the economy by the current administration, unbridled borrowing from the capital markets, creative misstatements of budget deficits and other critical fiscal figures were certain to come to a head eventually. Ghana went into the pandemic without adequate buffers and has emerged with a terribly battered economy. To make matters worse, a pandemic windfall of in excess of 33 billion Ghana cedis, which could have cushioned the economy remains unaudited and is believed to have been used largely in the quest to win election 2020 at all costs.
And that's former President Mahama there speaking last month at Harvard Business School, where he claimed that COVID-19 funds had been misused for 2020 elections instead of cushioning the economy. Well, presidential advisor on health and a member of the COVID-19 task force, Dr. Anthony Nsiasare, has debunked the allegations, describing it as unfortunate, especially coming from a statesman like John Mahama.
I'm just speaking as a presidential advisor and as a member of the National COVID-19 Task Force. I believe that what Ghana has done so far as COVID-19 pandemic fight is concerned, for anybody, especially for a former head of state who has been in government before, who has been a leader of this country before, should say this at an international forum. To me, it is something that should be condemned. If you get such international forum and you are speaking about your country, it's a time for you to let people know what Ghana has done so far as COVID-19 is concerned, and not to speculate. I'll call it speculation because I don't know where the figures that he's talking about came from. I don't know what, I think the word that he used was windfall. I don't understand the windfall that he's talking about. Secondly, I'm not too sure which funds he's talking about for election 2020. If you remember, that was the time that we even needed funds most to make sure that we can go ahead and do our election, which is a constitutional mandate that we have to do, and also be able to minimize the effect of COVID-19. So I'm very surprised that such a statement comes from him. I don't know where he's getting his figures from. I don't know whom he contacted before making this statement. I don't know which documents were used. So I'm sure, and I'm very certain that the Minister of Finance will come out to tell Ghanaians and the whole world what we use the money for. I know that we had some funds from the World Bank which came in tranches, and when World Bank, and he knows, as a former head of state, he knows the system that goes through with other loans or grants from multilaterals and bilaterals, what conditions, precedents that we have to follow, what system has to be put in place to even to take the money out to be used, and after you use the money, what goes through. It goes through a lot of auditing system, both by our audit service, which the Auditor General will come out of a report, and also they also take a private independent auditor to audit all these monies. And before they even give you the next tranche of money, they make sure that you follow all the various rules and regulations so far as the use of the money and the auditing is concerned. So such monies from multilaterals and bilaterals goes through a lot of stringent measures. So I'm very surprised that something like that the money was used for elections. Who used the money? Is it the Electoral Commission? The Electoral Commission came with a budget, and the budget was approved by Parliament and then given to Electoral Commission to run the elections. And I'm sure individual political parties, including his own political party, also source their own funding for elections. So I'm very surprised that he's saying that government used that money for elections. What I will say is that it's not true, and I haven't seen anywhere during when we were planning for the 2020 fight against the COVID-19 that monies were taken out of the money to be used for the fight. At the time that we were feeding people who didn't have money, and they were we locked about 46 districts down. That's what some money were used to feed them. Monies were used to buy reagents, monies were used to buy PPEs, and monies were used to buy laboratory equipment, and even establish isolation centers for the patients that we are having from COVID-19.
Papa, even before this the former statesman's statement, we know that some other state actors, including St. Ghana and Co., are mounting pressure coming out with reports requiring government to give accountability for the COVID funds.
You mentioned Send Ghana or some other NGOs or CSOs who don't know how government systems work. They can say that. But any money which is used by government, I'm saying this because I've been a CEO before, I've been a Director General before, it goes through proper auditing system. That's the audit service. That's the statutory body which audits all government funds. And as I said, apart from that, if it's money from the bilaterals or money from the multilaterals, it also goes, they also have their own checks and balances. And so I'm very surprised. You don't use the money today and tomorrow you say that it should be audited. Audit is done periodically, and the reports come out periodically. I think you have been watching on the tellies. Your cameras go to Parliament. After the audit, the Auditor General issues its report, which goes to Parliament. It's constitutional, and then the Public Accounts Committee sits in camera. Everybody sees the Auditor General sitting in camera of the TV cameras all over, and then they will then take whichever agency or ministry who spend the money to account if there's any problem. That will definitely be done. And I'm sure it's up to Parliament to, even if they want to do the auditing or something before, Parliament can also order that. So I find it very difficult when somebody who should know even better than some of us, because they've been in government before, he has been the whole president and the head of state, to go to an international forum where you are supposed to go and sell your country. I think Ghana has done well. And I'm not saying it. From international bodies, people who have done a lot of studies have come out to say that Ghana is among the best 3 countries in the fight against COVID-19.
Where you sit, do you think it's going to affect the gains made by the country or cast a slur on the country's image out there?
No, those of us who are helping His Excellency the President on this fight, we are not perturbed by all these things. We believe that, when anybody uses money, you account for it. Fortunately, we are here. We try to couch the policies and all this. And I'm sure Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Service, Ministry of Finance, anybody who uses the money, Ministry of Education, went through proper procurement system, went through proper financial management systems. Because if you do anything, by all means, the auditors will find out from whatever you are doing. And to get that figure, 33 billion Ghana cedis, I'm sure maybe he has some paper that he's holding, he has some figures. So he should publish that one and let everybody know. And when he publishes that one, then people can then take the figures on, analyze it, and critique it, and then make sure that what he's saying, if it is true or not. But I think if he doesn't have those figures and he just said it, then it's not good for the country. We are in a country where we want to turn this crisis into opportunity, the president has always been saying. And we're doing exactly that. Post-COVID, we want to be in a situation where we put ourselves as very strong, robust,
and that's Dr. Nsia Sare there. He is the Presidential Advisor on Health. He's a member of the COVID-19 National Response Team there, and he was speaking with my colleague, Sarah Parko. And that's how we end our show this afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us on 3FM's First Take. Many thanks to my producers, Cyril Dogbe. Many thanks to Collins Esuman. Thanks to Della for in-studio technical support, and Selwyn for our social media management. I'm Dzifa Gbeho-Bampoh. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Up next, of course, is who else? The #1 DJ in Ghana, DJ Faculty.